Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to honor one of the most ancient and resilient indigenous peoples of North America, the Sioux tribes. The Sioux, comprising the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota divisions, have shaped the history, culture, and spirit of this land for centuries. Their traditions, wisdom, and struggles are a testament to the enduring strength of Native American heritage. The Sioux tribes, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, are among the oldest indigenous peoples of North America, with a history that dates back thousands of years. Their ancestry can be traced to ancient Native American groups that lived in the woodlands of the Great Lakes region before migrating westward to the vast plains. Long before European settlers arrived, the Sioux had already established complex societies with well-defined social structures, governance systems, and spiritual beliefs that deeply connected them to the land. The Sioux people were originally semi-nomadic, relying on hunting, gathering, and fishing for sustenance. As they moved westward, they became highly skilled buffalo hunters, adapting their lifestyle to the Great Plains environment. The buffalo was central to their way of life, providing them with food, clothing, shelter, and tools. Every part of the animal was used, demonstrating the Sioux's deep respect for nature and their resourcefulness in utilizing their environment. Their ancient heritage is also reflected in their oral traditions. The Sioux people passed down stories, songs, and legends from generation to generation, preserving their history without the use of written language. These stories explain their origins, the wisdom of their ancestors, and their spiritual beliefs. The Great Spirit, known as Wakantanka, was at the center of their religious practices, representing a powerful and guiding force in the universe. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Sioux and their ancestors lived in North America for thousands of years, adapting to changing climates and landscapes. Their knowledge of the land allowed them to thrive in harsh environments, from dense forests to open plains. As one of the most resilient and enduring indigenous groups, the Sioux developed strong kinship bonds and community structures that enabled them to survive even in the face of external pressures. By the time Europeans made contact with them, the Sioux had already established themselves as a dominant force in the region. Their deep historical roots, combined with their ability to adapt and evolve, make them one of the most significant Native American tribes in the history of North America. Their ancient heritage is not only a testament to their endurance, but also a reminder of the rich and complex civilizations that existed long before colonization. The Sioux Nation is not a singular tribe but a vast and diverse group of indigenous people who are divided into three primary divisions: the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota. While they share a common ancestry, cultural traditions, and linguistic roots, each group has distinct characteristics, dialects, and historical experiences that define their identity. These divisions were not arbitrary but evolved over centuries due to migration patterns, geographical separations, and interactions with different environments and neighboring tribes. The Dakota are considered the original branch of the Sioux people. Their name means friend or ally in their language, reflecting their deeply communal nature. Historically, they lived in the woodlands and river valleys of what is now Minnesota, Wisconsin, and parts of Iowa. As one of the earliest groups to encounter European settlers and fur traders, the Dakota played a crucial role in early interactions between Native Americans and Europeans. They engaged in trade, adopted firearms, and adjusted to the shifting political landscape of colonization. However, these encounters also led to significant conflicts, such as the Dakota War of 1862, when broken treaties and mistreatment by the U.S. government led to a violent uprising. The Nakota are the smallest and least known of the three divisions. They primarily settled in the northern plains, in areas of modern-day North and South Dakota, Montana, and parts of Canada. Their name, like the Dakota, also means friend or ally. While the Nakota share similarities with both the Dakota and Lakota, they have a distinct linguistic dialect that sets them apart. Over time, the Nakota were less involved in large-scale conflicts compared to the Lakota, but they still faced many of the challenges that came with westward expansion, including forced removals and government-imposed policies that threatened their way of life. The Lakota, the westernmost branch of the Sioux, became the most well-known due to their involvement in significant historical events and battles. The name Lakota translates to allies or friends. They migrated westward onto the Great Plains, where they became expert buffalo hunters and fierce warriors. Their adaptation to a nomadic lifestyle, combined with their superior horseback riding skills, allowed them to dominate the plains. The Lakota played a central role in resisting U.S. expansion, engaging in famous battles such as the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, where they, along with their Cheyenne allies, defeated General Custer's forces. Leaders like Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Red Cloud became legendary figures in Native American resistance against the U.S. government. Despite their differences, the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota remained united by a shared cultural identity and strong kinship ties. Their languages, though slightly different, stem from the same linguistic family, the Siouan language group. They also shared core spiritual beliefs, such as the reverence for the Great Spirit, Wakantanka, and participation in sacred ceremonies like the sun dance. These traditions reinforced their unity and allowed them to preserve their identity even through centuries of hardship and forced assimilation. Each division of the Sioux has a unique history, shaped by their environment, migrations, and interactions with external forces. Their ability to maintain their distinct cultural heritage while staying connected as one Sioux nation is a testament to their strength and resilience as a people. The Sioux tribes, especially the Lakota, were among the most skilled warriors and horse riders in North American history. Their expertise in warfare, tactics, and horsemanship allowed them to dominate the Great Plains for centuries, resisting both rival tribes and the encroachment of European settlers and the U.S. government. The Sioux developed a warrior culture that was deeply rooted in their society, emphasizing bravery, honor, and loyalty to their people. Before the arrival of horses, Sioux warriors relied on foot travel for hunting and battle. They used stealth, endurance, and intimate knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver their enemies. However, after acquiring horses in the 17th and 18th centuries, mainly through trade with Spanish and other Native American groups, the Sioux transformed into one of the most powerful mounted warrior societies in North America. Horses revolutionized their way of life, making hunting and warfare far more effective. Horses allowed Sioux warriors to travel long distances quickly, giving them a major advantage in battles and hunting expeditions. With this mobility, they could launch surprise attacks, retreat swiftly when outnumbered, and cover vast territories. Young Sioux men were trained in horseback riding from an early age, learning to control their mounts with precision. They could ride bareback at full speed, fire arrows or rifles while galloping, and even hang off the side of their horses to shield themselves from enemy fire. This level of skill made them formidable opponents on the battlefield. The Sioux warrior society was built on principles of courage, honor, and respect. Young men sought to prove themselves through acts of bravery, often engaging in counting coup, a practice where warriors would strike or touch an enemy in battle without harming them, demonstrating their fearlessness. Warriors who performed heroic deeds earned prestige within the tribe, and their exploits were celebrated in oral traditions, songs, and dances. Some warriors even wore war shirts adorned with scalps or feathers to signify their achievements in battle. One of the most famous Sioux military leaders was Crazy Horse, a brilliant tactician who led his people in several battles against U.S. forces. His ability to outmaneuver the U.S. cavalry, along with his unwavering commitment to defending Sioux lands, made him one of the most respected figures in Native American history. Another legendary warrior, Sitting Bull, was not only a skilled fighter, but also a spiritual leader who played a crucial role in uniting the Sioux and Cheyenne against U.S. expansion. Their most famous victory was at the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876, where they annihilated General Custer's forces, proving their military superiority. Despite their strength and strategic brilliance, the Sioux eventually faced overwhelming odds as the U.S. government deployed superior numbers, advanced weaponry, and harsh policies to subdue them. The introduction of rifles and cannons, along with relentless military campaigns, led to their forced removals from their ancestral lands. Even after suffering defeats, the Sioux warrior spirit never truly died. They continued to resist, whether through direct conflict, cultural preservation, or legal battles for their rights and sovereignty. The legacy of Sioux warriors and horse riders remains deeply ingrained in Native American history. Their unparalleled mastery of horseback warfare, their dedication to defending their way of life, and their ability to adapt to changing circumstances made them one of the most formidable indigenous groups of their time. Their stories continue to inspire modern Sioux communities, keeping alive the traditions of bravery and resilience that defined them for centuries. For the Sioux tribes, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, their connection to the land was not merely practical, but deeply spiritual. Every mountain, river, and prairie was infused with meaning, tied to their identity, history, and survival. The Sioux believed that nature was not something to be owned or controlled, but a living entity with its own spirit and purpose. Their spiritual beliefs were centered around harmony with the land, animals, and the cosmic forces that governed life, with the Great Spirit, Wakantanka, standing at the heart of their religious worldview. The Black Hills, the heart of Sioux spirituality. Among all the lands the Sioux considered sacred, none were more revered than the Black Hills, Pahasapa, in present-day South Dakota and Wyoming. These forested mountains, rising in contrast to the surrounding prairies, were regarded as the home of the Great Spirit. The Black Hills were the site of religious ceremonies, vision quests, and burial grounds for Sioux ancestors. To the Sioux, these lands were a gift from Wakantanka, a place where their people could communicate with the spiritual world and seek guidance for their lives. However, the sanctity of the Black Hills was deeply violated when gold was discovered there in the 1870s. Despite earlier treaties, such as the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868, which guaranteed the Sioux exclusive rights to the Black Hills, the U.S. government allowed miners and settlers to flood into the region. This betrayal led to resistance, culminating in conflicts like the Great Sioux War, 1876 to 1877, in which leaders like Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull fought to defend their sacred homeland. Even today, the Sioux continue to fight legal battles for the return of the Black Hills, refusing to accept financial compensation for the land they consider stolen. Spiritual practices and the Great Spirit. The Sioux's spiritual beliefs were rooted in the concept of Wakantanka, often translated as the Great Spirit or Great Mystery. Wakantanka was not a single deity but a force encompassing all of existence, including the sky, earth, animals, and human beings. The Sioux believed everything in nature had a spirit, Wakan, and should be treated with respect. They viewed life as interconnected, with each action affecting the balance of the world. One of the most significant spiritual practices of the Sioux was the vision quest, Hambolsia. Young men seeking wisdom, guidance, or a deeper connection to the spiritual world would go into the wilderness alone, fasting and praying for several days. Through dreams and visions, they hoped to receive messages from Wakantanka or spirit guides, which would shape their destiny as warriors, leaders, or healers. The Sun Dance, Waiwanyang was another crucial ceremony, performed to seek spiritual renewal, healing, and unity among the people. The Sun Dance involved days of fasting, prayer, and physical endurance, where participants would dance around a sacred tree while making offerings to the Great Spirit. This intense ritual demonstrated the Sioux's commitment to their faith and their willingness to sacrifice for the well-being of their tribe. The buffalo and the circle of life. The buffalo was not just a source of food and materials for the Sioux, it was a spiritual being. The Sioux believed that the buffalo was a sacred gift from Wakantanka, provided to sustain them physically and spiritually. Every part of the buffalo was used with respect, and prayers were offered before and after a hunt to honor the animal's spirit. The disappearance of the buffalo due to overhunting by European settlers was not only an economic disaster, but a spiritual loss that deeply affected the Sioux way of life. The The Sioux also followed the sacred circle, sacred hoop, or medicine wheel, a symbol representing the unity of life, the four directions, and the eternal cycle of nature. This belief in cycles, day and night, seasons, birth and death, shaped their worldview, emphasizing balance, respect, and continuity. The deep spiritual connection the Sioux had with their land, animals, and cosmic forces shaped their identity and guided their decisions. Their reverence for nature was not just a belief system, but a way of life, influencing everything from their governance to their daily survival. Even after centuries of displacement and hardship, Sioux spiritual traditions continue to thrive, reminding the world of their sacred bond with the land and the Great Spirit. The Sioux tribes, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, played a crucial role in resisting U.S. expansion across North America. As settlers, soldiers, and government agents moved westward, the Sioux found themselves at the forefront of one of the most intense and prolonged conflicts between Native Americans and the United States. Their resistance was driven by the desire to protect their lands, traditions, and way of life from an advancing force that sought to dispossess them. This resistance took many forms: diplomatic negotiations, armed conflicts, and spiritual movements, all aimed at preserving the sovereignty of the Sioux Nation. Early contact and tensions. The Sioux originally lived in the woodlands of the upper Mississippi River region, but gradually migrated westward onto the Great Plains in the 17th and 18th centuries. This move brought them into competition with other indigenous nations, such as the Crow and Pawnee, but also positioned them in the path of European and American expansion. The introduction of firearms, horses, and the fur trade transformed Sioux society, allowing them to dominate the plains for a time. However, as the United States gained control of more territory, tensions between the Sioux and settlers increased. In the early 1800s, treaties were signed that promised peace and land rights, but these agreements were often ignored or broken by the U.S. government. As more settlers pushed into Sioux territory, conflicts became inevitable. The Dakota War of 1862, the first major uprising. One of the earliest large-scale conflicts between the Sioux and the U.S. government was the Dakota War of 1862, also known as the Sioux Uprising. The Dakota people, struggling with broken treaties, food shortages, and mistreatment by government traitors, launched a rebellion in Minnesota. Led by figures such as Little Crow, the Dakota attacked settlements and military outposts, seeking to reclaim their lands and force the government to uphold its promises. The conflict resulted in the deaths of hundreds of settlers and soldiers, but the U.S. military ultimately crushed the rebellion. In the aftermath, 38 Dakota men were executed in the largest mass hanging in U.S. history, and many others were forced from their homeland. This marked the beginning of a long period of displacement and harsh treatment of the Sioux people. The Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868, and broken promises. Despite ongoing conflicts, the U.S. government attempted to negotiate peace with the Sioux through treaties. One of the most significant agreements was the Treaty of Fort Laramie, 1868, which granted the Sioux exclusive rights to the Black Hills, a region considered sacred. The treaty also established the Great Sioux Reservation, covering much of present-day South Dakota. However, this peace was short-lived. When gold was discovered in the Black Hills in the 1870s, the U.S. government reneged on the treaty, allowing miners and settlers to invade Sioux lands. The Sioux, unwilling to give up their sacred homeland, resisted with force. The Great Sioux War, 1876 to 1877, defiance and victory at Little Bighorn. The violation of the Fort Laramie Treaty led to one of the most famous conflicts in American history, the Great Sioux War of 1876 to 1877. This war saw legendary leaders such as Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, and Gull rise to defend their people against U.S. military aggression. The most famous battle of this war was the Battle of Little Bighorn, June 25 to 26, 1876, where a coalition of Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors, numbering around 2,000, decisively defeated the 7th Cavalry Regiment led by General George Armstrong Custer. Custer and over 250 of his men were killed in what became known as Custer's Last Stand. This victory shocked the U.S. government and became a symbol of Sioux resistance. However, despite this triumph, the Sioux could not hold out forever. The U.S. government responded with overwhelming military force, destroying Sioux villages, cutting off food supplies, and forcing many bands to surrender. Crazy Horse was captured and later killed in 1877, while Sitting Bull fled to Canada before eventually returning to the U.S., where he was later assassinated in 1890. The Wounded Knee Massacre, 1890, the end of armed resistance. Even after their military defeats, the Sioux continued to resist in other ways. In the late 1880s, the ghost dance movement spread among Native American tribes, including the Sioux. This spiritual movement, based on visions of a future where the white settlers would disappear and Native American lands would be restored, terrified the U.S. government, which feared it would lead to another uprising. In December 1890, the U.S. military attempted to disarm a group of Lakota at Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota. In the chaos that followed, soldiers opened fire, killing over 300 Lakota men, women, and children in what became known as the Wounded Knee Massacre. This tragic event marked the end of large-scale armed resistance by the Sioux and was a turning point in their struggle against U.S. expansion, legal battles, and ongoing resistance. Although the Sioux were militarily defeated, their fight for sovereignty and land rights never ended. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, Sioux leaders and activists have continued to challenge the U.S. government over broken treaties and stolen land. The Black Hills land claim remains one of the most significant legal battles, with the U.S. Supreme Court ruling in 1980 that the government had illegally taken the Black Hills and awarding the Sioux a settlement of over $100 million. However, the Sioux have refused the money, insisting that the land itself, not financial compensation, must be returned. Sioux resistance has also taken modern forms, such as the Standing Rock protests, 2016 to 2017, against the Dakota Access Pipeline, which threatened Sioux water sources and sacred lands. This movement, led by Lakota and Dakota activists, gained international attention and demonstrated that the spirit of resistance is still alive among the Sioux people. While much of the history of Native American tribes, including the Sioux, is often framed around their male warriors and leaders, the role of women in Sioux society was equally significant and multifaceted. Sioux women were not only the backbone of their families and communities, but they also played pivotal roles in governance, spirituality, and social organization. Their contributions were foundational to the tribe's survival and cultural continuity, and they were respected as key figures in the tribe's daily functioning and long-term well-being. Women as providers and sustainers of family life. In Sioux culture, women were primarily responsible for maintaining the home and ensuring the survival of their families. While men hunted and engaged in warfare, women took on the crucial tasks of agriculture, food preservation, and domestic management. They cultivated crops like corn, beans, and squash, known as the Three Sisters, which were essential staples in the Sioux diet. This agricultural knowledge and the women's ability to grow food provided a steady and reliable source of nourishment for the tribe, particularly during times when hunting was difficult. Additionally, women were tasked with processing and preserving the meat from buffalo and other animals, turning hides into clothing, shelter coverings, and tools. The importance of their role in transforming raw materials into usable products cannot be overstated. They also prepared food and cared for the children, ensuring that the tribe's young would grow up strong and able to carry on their traditions. Sioux women were often skilled in the art of creating intricate beadwork, quill work, and woven items, which were both functional and symbolic. Their creations were often used in ceremonies, trade, and as forms of personal expression. Women in governance and decision-making. Although the Sioux society was patriarchal in many ways, women held substantial influence in the governance of their tribes. In certain cases, women were consulted on important matters, such as tribal affairs, diplomacy, and warfare. Their voices were particularly heard in the context of the tribal council, where elder women or matriarchs were seen as wise advisors. For example, Lakota women were instrumental in the decision to wage or end wars, as they understood the consequences of warfare on their families and communities. Women also held significant power in the selection of leaders. Chiefs and warriors often needed the approval or support of the women of their tribe to solidify their status and leadership. The respect for women's input in these processes indicates their vital role in the health and continuity of the tribe. In many Sioux bands, older women, known as the grandmothers, wielded influence, offering counsel to the younger generations about both practical matters and spiritual guidance. Spiritual role of Sioux women. In Sioux spirituality, women held revered positions, particularly in ceremonies related to fertility, healing, and community well-being. The Sioux worldview was deeply rooted in balance and harmony, and the feminine aspect of their spirituality was integral to this worldview. Women were seen as keepers of life, with their ability to bear children and nurture the next generation of the tribe being central to the Sioux belief system. One of the most significant roles women played in spiritual practices was in the sun dance ceremony, a sacred ritual of renewal and healing. Women were often involved in preparing for the event, organizing the space, and performing necessary rites, though they did not participate in the dance itself. The ceremony was considered so powerful and important that the presence of women was crucial for its spiritual success. The Sioux also believed that women's connection to the earth, as nurturers and caregivers, made them closer to the spiritual world, allowing them to serve as intermediaries between their people and the Great Spirit. Women also played important roles in the healing arts. Many Sioux women were herbalists, healers, and midwives, entrusted with knowledge passed down through generations. Their understanding of medicinal plants and natural remedies allowed them to treat illnesses, injuries, and assist in childbirth. Women were the stewards of this knowledge, and their role as healers was vital to the health of the community. Women in the face of U.S. expansion. As the Sioux faced increasing pressure from U.S. expansion in the 19th century, women's roles evolved to meet the challenges brought by displacement, loss of land, and war. During the Great Sioux War, for instance, women's work shifted from primarily agricultural and domestic tasks to support roles for the resistance. Women worked alongside men to help care for the wounded, provide food and water for warriors, and even took up arms in some cases. Women were also central to the cultural preservation of the Sioux during this period, maintaining oral traditions, educating children, and keeping the Sioux spirit alive during times of hardship. One remarkable example of Sioux women's strength and leadership during these difficult times was Bright Eyes, a woman from the Lakota tribe who was known for her courage and activism. She advocated for the welfare of her people, particularly women and children, during the difficult years of displacement and forced relocation. Women like Bright Eyes became symbols of resilience, showing that Sioux women were not only passive observers of history, but active agents of survival and cultural continuity. The changing role of Sioux women in the 20th and 21st centuries. In the 20th century, as the Sioux faced the ongoing effects of colonization, forced assimilation, and modern challenges, women continued to adapt and play important roles in their communities. Sioux women became leaders in the fight for civil rights, the preservation of cultural traditions, and the struggle for sovereignty. Women such as Wilma Mankiller, though not directly from the Sioux Nation, inspired indigenous women across North America, including the Sioux, to take up leadership roles in politics and activism. Today, Sioux women continue to be strong voices in their communities. Many have become activists for Native American rights, particularly in areas related to land reclamation, environmental protection, and the preservation of Sioux language and culture. They serve as tribal leaders, educators, and advocates, making significant contributions to the ongoing fight for Native American sovereignty and cultural revitalization. Their leadership continues to be rooted in the traditions and teachings passed down from their ancestors, demonstrating the enduring power of Sioux women in shaping the future of their people. Sioux women, both historically and in contemporary times, embody resilience, strength, and a deep commitment to their families, communities, and cultural heritage. Their roles as providers, leaders, healers, and spiritual guides have been crucial to the survival of their people, and their legacy continues to inspire future generations. Language and oral traditions have always been at the heart of Sioux identity. The Sioux people, divided into the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota groups, share a linguistic and cultural heritage that has been passed down for centuries through storytelling, songs, and rituals. Their language is not just a means of communication, but a vessel for their history, values, spirituality, and worldview. Despite historical efforts to suppress indigenous languages, the Sioux language remains a powerful symbol of resistance, resilience, and cultural survival. The Sioux language, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota dialects. The Sioux language belongs to the Siouan language family, one of the largest indigenous language groups in North America. The three main dialects, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, are closely related but have distinct differences in pronunciation, vocabulary, and regional usage. Lakota is the most widely spoken dialect and is primarily used by the Western Sioux tribes in North and South Dakota. Dakota is spoken by the Eastern Sioux, particularly in Minnesota and parts of Nebraska. Nakota is the least spoken dialect, primarily used by smaller groups in Montana and Canada. These dialects were traditionally passed down through oral instruction rather than written texts. Elders taught children through direct communication, storytelling, and ceremonial teachings, ensuring that language was deeply intertwined with cultural practices. This oral transmission helped maintain Sioux traditions and reinforced communal bonds. The suppression of the Sioux language. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, U.S. government policies aimed to eradicate Native American languages, including Sioux dialects. The boarding school system, implemented by the federal government and Christian missionaries, forcibly removed Native children from their families and placed them in institutions where they were punished for speaking their native language. These schools, established under the philosophy of kill the Indian, save the man, sought to assimilate Native children into Western society by erasing their cultural identity. Students who spoke Lakota, Dakota, or Nakota faced severe punishments such as beatings, isolation, and forced labor. As a result, many Sioux children grew up unable to speak their ancestral language, leading to a significant decline in fluency among younger generations. Additionally, government policies, such as the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 and later English-only education mandates, further marginalized Sioux languages. By the mid-20th century, many Sioux communities had lost a large portion of their linguistic heritage, with only elders remaining fluent in the language. The importance of oral traditions. Oral traditions have always been a fundamental part of Sioux culture, serving as the primary means of preserving history, spirituality, and societal values. Since the Sioux traditionally had no written language, knowledge was passed down through generations via storytelling, songs, prayers, and ceremonial teachings. Storytelling. Sioux elders and storytellers, known as Iktomi Wakasa, Spider-Men, played a crucial role in passing down myths, history, and moral lessons. Stories about Iktomi, the trickster spider spirit, and the white buffalo calf woman were used to teach children about Sioux beliefs and values. Songs and chants. Traditional Sioux songs, sung during ceremonies, battles, and spiritual gatherings, carried deep meanings and connected people to their ancestors. Songs were often composed spontaneously and used as a way to honor warriors, communicate with spirits, or guide individuals through significant life events. Sacred rituals. Ceremonies like the Sun Dance, Vision Quest, and Sweat Lodge heavily relied on oral instruction, where elders guided younger generations in spiritual practices. These teachings were considered sacred and were only shared with those deemed ready to receive them. Oral traditions ensured that Sioux knowledge remained alive, even in times of hardship. They connected individuals to their past and reinforced a sense of belonging within the community. Efforts to revive the Sioux language. Recognizing the severe decline of their language, Sioux communities have launched various initiatives to revitalize and preserve Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota dialects. Language schools and immersion programs. In response to language loss, Sioux-run schools and language programs have been established across reservations. Institutions like the Lakota Language Consortium and Dakota Language Project work to teach children their native tongue through full immersion programs. These schools use traditional teaching methods, storytelling, and modern digital tools to engage younger generations. Elder-led language revitalization. Many Sioux elders, who are among the last fluent speakers, have taken on the responsibility of teaching the language to younger generations. Elders conduct language workshops, mentor apprentices, and hold cultural gatherings to encourage everyday use of Sioux dialects. Online and mobile learning tools. With advancements in technology, Sioux language learning has expanded beyond reservations. Digital resources such as Lakota and Dakota language apps, online courses, and YouTube tutorials have made it easier for Sioux people, both on and off reservations, to reconnect with their language. Social media platforms also play a role in language revitalization, where native speakers share lessons and engage in conversations in Sioux dialects. Community language initiatives. Many Sioux communities have embraced the use of their native language in daily life. Some tribal governments have adopted Lakota, Dakota, or Nakota as official languages in their schools and offices. Additionally, cultural events and ceremonies increasingly prioritize the use of Sioux dialects to encourage fluency among participants. These efforts have seen gradual success, with more young Sioux learning their ancestral language and incorporating it into their daily lives. However, the challenge remains significant, as many fluent speakers are aging, and the influence of English remains dominant. The role of language in Sioux identity. For the Sioux people, language is more than just a way to communicate. It is a spiritual and cultural bond that connects them to their ancestors, traditions, and the land. Many Sioux believe that speaking their native language allows them to honor their history and maintain their distinct identity in a world that has long sought to assimilate them. In ceremonies and prayer, the Sioux language carries sacred meanings that cannot be fully translated into English. Certain words and phrases reflect unique worldviews, such as Midikyung Oyazing, we are all related, which encapsulates the interconnectedness of all living beings. This concept is central to Sioux spirituality and reinforces their deep respect for nature and community. Furthermore, language plays a crucial role in resistance and sovereignty. The continued use of Sioux dialects is a form of defiance against historical oppression and a statement that the Sioux people will not allow their culture to be erased. By reclaiming their language, they assert their right to self-determination and cultural survival, preserving oral traditions in the modern world. While technological advancements have led to increased efforts in language revival, they have also posed challenges to traditional oral storytelling. Younger generations, influenced by digital media and modern lifestyles, may not always engage with traditional forms of learning. To bridge this gap, Sioux elders and cultural leaders are integrating oral traditions into new formats, such as podcast series featuring traditional stories narrated by elders, animated videos of Sioux myths and legends for children, live storytelling events streamed online for wider accessibility, interactive workshops where youth can learn from elders in person. By adapting oral traditions to modern platforms, the Sioux ensure that their stories, teachings, and language remain relevant and accessible to future generations. The revival of the Sioux language and oral traditions is not just about preserving the past, it is about shaping the future. By reclaiming their language, reconnecting with their heritage, and passing down their knowledge, the Sioux people continue to assert their identity and sovereignty in a rapidly changing world. The Sioux people, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, have faced relentless challenges over the centuries, from forced displacement and warfare to cultural suppression and economic hardship. However, despite these adversities, they continue to fight for their sovereignty, land rights, and the preservation of their rich cultural heritage. The modern era has introduced new struggles, including poverty, legal battles over treaty violations, environmental threats, and the loss of traditional knowledge. Yet, through activism, education, and legal resistance, the The Sioux persist in their efforts to reclaim their rights and secure a future that honors their ancestors. The fight for land and treaty rights. One of the longest-standing struggles for the Sioux is their fight for the Black Hills, a sacred region that was taken from them in violation of the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie. Despite legal victories, including a 1980 U.S. Supreme Court ruling that acknowledged the U.S. government had unlawfully seized the Black Hills and ordered compensation, the Sioux have refused to accept monetary payment for their sacred land. Their stance remains clear. The Black Hills were never for sale. The ongoing fight to reclaim this land is a defining issue for the Sioux, symbolizing their broader struggle against the United States' history of broken treaties and land theft. Beyond the Black Hills, the Sioux have continued to face legal battles over reservation land, water rights, and sovereignty. The U.S. government and corporations have often sought to exploit Sioux lands for mining, oil pipelines, and other commercial ventures, disregarding the environmental and cultural consequences. Sioux activists and leaders have been at the forefront of these struggles, challenging governmental policies and advocating for their legal and territorial rights. The Dakota Access Pipeline and environmental resistance. In recent years, one of the most significant moments of Sioux resistance came during the Standing Rock protests, 2016 to 2017, against the Dakota Access Pipeline, DAPL. This controversial pipeline project threatened to contaminate the Missouri River, a vital water source for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, and encroached upon sacred burial grounds. The movement, led by indigenous activists under the rallying cry MNI Wakoni, Water is Life, quickly gained national and international attention. Thousands of native and non-native allies gathered at Standing Rock to protest the pipeline's construction, engaging in peaceful demonstrations, prayer ceremonies, and legal challenges. The U.S. government initially halted the project under the Obama administration, but it was later revived under the Trump administration. The pipeline was ultimately completed, but the Standing Rock protests ignited a renewed sense of indigenous activism and environmental justice advocacy across the world. The Sioux's resistance to DAPL was not just about protecting water, but also about asserting their sovereignty and standing against continued encroachments on their lands. The protests demonstrated the Sioux people's unwavering determination to protect their environment, culture, and rights, despite facing militarized police forces, mass arrests, and legal repression. Economic and social challenges on reservations. Today, many Sioux people live on reservations that suffer from severe economic disadvantages due to historical oppression and systemic neglect. Unemployment rates on some Sioux reservations exceed 50%, and poverty is widespread, with many families struggling to access basic necessities like healthcare, education, and adequate housing. The lack of economic opportunities has led to social issues such as substance abuse, mental health crises, and high suicide rates, particularly among Sioux youth. The education system on reservations also faces significant challenges. Underfunding, a lack of resources, and culturally inappropriate curriculums have made it difficult for Sioux students to succeed in mainstream education. Many schools fail to incorporate Sioux history, language, and traditions, further alienating Native students from their heritage. However, Sioux communities are actively working to change this by establishing tribal schools and language immersion programs that emphasize Sioux culture and identity, ensuring that future generations stay connected to their roots. The loss and revival of language and culture. One of the greatest threats to Sioux identity has been the decline of the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota languages. Due to forced assimilation policies, including boarding schools where Native children were punished for speaking their language, fluency in Sioux dialects has drastically decreased. Today, fewer Sioux people speak their ancestral tongue fluently, putting the language at risk of extinction. However, language revitalization efforts are gaining momentum. Sioux communities have launched language preservation programs, online courses, and cultural initiatives to teach the younger generation their native tongue. Schools on reservations are integrating Sioux language classes, and elders are working with linguists to document and pass down traditional knowledge. These efforts are crucial for maintaining Sioux identity, as language is deeply tied to culture, spirituality, and worldview. Beyond language, traditional practices such as the sun dance, vision quests, and storytelling are being revived. Sioux artists, musicians, and writers are using their creative talents to share their people's history and struggles, bringing Sioux culture into modern spaces while honoring its ancient roots. Political activism and the future of Sioux sovereignty. Despite centuries of oppression, the Sioux have never stopped advocating for their rights. Sioux leaders and activists continue to push for tribal sovereignty, self-governance, and greater control over their lands and resources. Organizations such as the Lakota People's Law Project and the Indigenous Environmental Network are working to defend Sioux rights and promote sustainable development for their communities. Additionally, Sioux political leaders are becoming more active in state and national politics, ensuring that indigenous voices are heard in government. The rise of Native American representation in politics is a crucial step toward addressing long-standing injustices and building a future where Sioux sovereignty is fully recognized. The Sioux people's story is one of perseverance and defiance against overwhelming odds. From the days of Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse to modern activists at Standing Rock, the Sioux have continually resisted cultural erasure and fought for their rightful place in the world. While the challenges they face are immense, their resilience and determination continue to inspire movements for indigenous justice and human rights worldwide. The Sioux, Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota have endured centuries of hardship, yet their spirit remains unbroken. Their language, traditions, and way of life have withstood relentless efforts of erasure, proving that their cultural identity is not just a relic of the past, but a living, evolving force. Through the tireless work of elders, activists, and educators, the Sioux people are reclaiming their language, reviving their oral traditions, and reinforcing their sovereignty. Their story is one of survival, resistance, and renewal. As they continue to fight for their rights, their sacred lands, and the preservation of their culture, the Sioux remind the world that their voices will never be silenced. Their resilience is a testament to their ancestors, and their future generations will carry forward the legacy of one of North America's oldest and most enduring indigenous nations.